All right, so we didn't have anybody that wanted to speak, and so they made me do it. That's not true. I received a number of requests for information about the homeless situation. I've spent quite a bit of time working with the homeless, directly on the streets. Started a number of years ago. One of the organizations that helps with the feeding project that we're part of is looking for volunteers, and so on the table up front you will see some flyers that explain opportunities. If you're retired and you're bored on a Tuesday and Thursday afternoon between noon and 3, and you're willing to go to National City, there's an opportunity for you to help put together some of the food bags that you've been seeing in some of the slides. So take a look at that. I want to go through relatively quickly what I've learned about homelessness. Some of it through academic research, but a lot of it because I spend time with the homeless people on the street talking to them, which I've found is one way to uncover the real truth about how people end up homeless, what they want in terms of getting off the street, and it's not what you read in the media, and it's not what the politicians tell you. And I'm here to say, sadly, the politicians are worried about getting reelected. The media is worried about headlines that get you to click through so they get their advertising. They're not really willing to go down and do what I do and what a number of volunteers that work with me, several of whom are here in this room. You saw the dumpster project featured a number of people from our club who came down to support me when we started that. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I've learned. And the first thing is nobody should live like this, all right? We can all agree. But the problem in San Diego is we don't have housing for everybody, especially people who suffer from employment issues and don't have disposable income. So what do? And has the problem gotten worse? I should have waited to turn this and asked people if they think it's worse now than it was 100 years ago. The truth is, it's not. There's a number of reasons for that, but if you take a look at the population and the estimated percentage of the homeless as a percentage of population, it's actually gone down 0.5% in 100 years. How can that be? Why is it so more visible to us? Well, we had an agrarian economy in 1920. So everybody lived in rural and semi-rural areas. A lot of the homeless were then known as hobos. They washed dishes at the local diner. They got paid in cash. They took their cash. They bought their food. They bought their half pint of whiskey. They went back down by the railroad tracks, started a fire, cooked their dinner, spent the night, repeat the next day. When the town got tired of them or they got tired of the town, they hopped on the rail and they moved to the next town. 50% of the US population was living in those areas. Now, 14%. What did we see? We saw industrialization and a shift to an urban economy. The population shifted to large urban areas. And then in the 1980s, it was a popular idea to get rid of state mental hospitals. Sounded on the surface like a great idea. Get people out of institutions, give them an opportunity to be productive, move into small group homes with supervision. The problem was people with serious mental health problems still couldn't function in that environment. By the time society realized that experiment wasn't working, we had no money to rebuild those institutions. We can't go back out now. Can you imagine in San Diego trying to find 20 acres to build a state mental hospital in San Diego County? It's just not feasible. So where did those people go? They went to the streets. They didn't last in the group homes. Many of them tried to go back to family, but their family had put them in the mental hospital in the first place and they didn't want them. So we had a big shift. And then in 2007, we all became journalists. All of a sudden the iPhone. So you've got a population moving to the city, homeless people moving to the city, and now all of you could go around and say, look how terrible it is, and take a picture and put it on social media. That didn't change the fact that as a percentage of our population, it hasn't really changed. It's more visible. But same percentage, actually lower percentage. And those numbers come from a variety of sources. So what I did is I averaged everybody because I tend not to believe any one source. So the ranges ended up being where I got the averages. Also in the 1980s, San Diego had 14,000 single-room occupancy dwellings in our urban area, meaning in downtown. Those are what we would call flea bag hotels, flop houses. They're usually a dorm-size room with a common bathroom and maybe a common kitchen and a seating area around a television. We have fewer than 4,000 left. We tore 10,000 down to make room for Petco Park, multi-million-dollar condos. We revitalized downtown, but we had no plan for where the people we put out of housing were going. In the state of California, if you close a mobile home park, and if it's even worse if you close one in the coastal region, but if you close a mobile home park, there are statutes that say you must pay to relocate people, you must help them find housing, and if they have to pay more rent than they were paying where they were, you have to pay the differential for 2 years if you're a developer. No such rules existed for tearing down SROs. So we put 10,000 people essentially on the street with no plan to deal with them. What I hear from people downtown all the time is, well, there's this guy who sleeps up against my building and he pees and he smells bad. And I say, do you know he used to live there for 20 years? That corner he's sleeping on is where his home was. You invaded his turf. He's not invading yours. He's simply trying to survive. This is what happened. The headlines also distort the truth. They like to tell you that the people out there are all mentally ill, they're all drug addicts. But the truth is, they're not. You have some incredibly intelligent people on the street who have had some terrible individual tragedy that put them on the street. After a certain period of time on the street, everybody has PTSD, primarily from sleep deprivation. It's almost impossible to get a good night's sleep if you're on the sidewalk, especially if you're a female and you're afraid to close your eyes at night. We see women who walk the streets all night long to avoid being assaulted. And they take meth so they can stay awake. Not because they want meth, because it's fun, but because it's a survival mechanism for them. They sleep next to the trolley that goes by every 15 minutes and wakes them up. For a homeless person to get 3 hours of uninterrupted sleep in a night, it's considered a wonderful night. It's a tough life. It's not a life, in spite of what people tell you, there are not a lot of people who want to be there. That's 20, 60, 20 is about 20% of the people on the street truly have major drug addictions or mental illness, both of which would require inpatient treatment. Some of those are dual diagnosis, meaning they have both. About 20% are the hobos of the old day. We call them now urban campers. They're pretty much invisible to us because they pack their tent up during the day, they stash it, they go work their part-time job. They may have a check from the VA for their pension, their Social Security. In other words, if they were the only ones out there, you wouldn't know it unless you encountered an area where they slept at night, because they pick up every day and move around. We're never going to lose those people because they are people who truly prefer not to live in apartments, not to live in houses, not to have a permanent address. It's the 60% that get the blame that don't deserve it. And those are the people that would do almost anything to get off the street. Those are the women whose husband went to jail and left them with 2 kids and an inability to pay the rent. Those are the vets who get out of the military after 20 years. We do a great job of taking somebody, putting them in boot camp and turning them at age 18 into a soldier. Then at age 38, after 20 years in the military, we don't do anything to turn them back into a productive civilian. We just congratulate them on their 20, give them their retirement, and we send them out and say, good luck. I say this having seen some of our volunteers coming to us after their military career while they're transitioning. There's a period of time where they have to do paperwork. I hear them say, I don't know what to do next. Nobody's telling me what to do at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. They struggle because society doesn't provide the structure that's been part of their life for 20 years. And the military doesn't take the time to teach them how to function in a society that doesn't provide structure, it provides personal freedom. You have to build your own schedule. So we see them both as volunteers, then sadly we see a lot of them sleeping on the street. Because eventually, if they can't find something to do, they end up on the street. Housing first. Everybody talks about housing first. Great concept. Put people in housing first, and then deal with the problems they have. Then deal with their mental illness, then deal with their drug addiction, provide them whatever supportive services. San Diego, we don't have any housing. We're a housing first community without any housing. So how do you deliver services to people when you can't give them the housing first? Well, you spend millions of dollars on programs that have no impact, and if you've been reading the headlines lately, not only do they have no impact, we're actually losing ground. Those decisions are made by policy people, politicians, people who have a desire to try to keep their positions, get reelected, not get noticed, and then they take these multi-million-dollar solutions they've developed up on the 10th floor and they drop them on the street and they act shocked that they don't work. It's like, you have customers. The homeless people are actually your customers for the programs you're designing. My biggest shock was finding out that nobody goes and actually talks to the homeless and says, how did you get here? What do you need? What do you want? So I started doing that. Get a surprising number of answers, ranging from just to be left alone to, I need job training. I want to learn about computers, but I can't afford one. Lots of different responses, but the bottom line is people that are developing the policies and programs and spending millions of taxpayer dollars aren't talking to their customers. I like to tell them it's like you decided you're going to open a store in San Diego to sell down jackets in July. And you're surprised nobody came in the front door to buy any. You didn't survey your customers. You didn't look at what was needed. You didn't ask them what they needed and wanted. And that's what's happening right now, is we're spending a lot of money, but we're spending it blindly. It's sort of blindfolded and a shotgun approach. Maybe we'll hit something that works. What I try to do is understand that everybody needs an individual solution. These are some of the reasons, typically, that people end up on the street. Death of a spouse or caregiver, divorce, rent increases, spousal abuse, medical issues, getting out of jail, leaving the military, drug addiction, mental illness, immigration status. Everybody has a different story. They don't all fit in one top-down designed box. We've got to start crafting small bottom-up solutions that gain traction. What do they need? Pretty much if you talk to them, this is everything they'll tell you they actually need to improve their lives. They need showers. There's no place for them to take a shower. They need toilets. There are almost no public toilets open in downtown San Diego. That's a problem for our tourists as well. They need storage. Right now, how many people have heard somebody say, well, if you just got a job, you could get yourself out of this? Go ahead, raise your hands if you've heard somebody say that about homeless people. Okay, right now the reality is if they get a job that's part-time, when they leave their tent during the day, there are three things that can happen. Two of them are bad. One is somebody else in the homeless community will take their stuff, because there are people down there that, given the opportunity, will steal to survive. Two is the police will come by for a sweep. They move their tents out of the sidewalk. They come by and spray the sidewalk down. Then they have to move things back. But if they're not there, the police take their tents and everything they own, throw it into a dumpster, and drive away with it. So when they come back 4 hours later from their part-time job, their house is gone. Somebody stole it. Many of them, the city made a big deal about opening up a storage facility in Barrio Logan. Except the storage facility is only open limited hours. So if you work a job, like a restaurant dishwasher, and you get off at 10 o'clock at night, you can't go to the storage facility and get your stuff out that you put there in the morning because it's not open. So they don't put it in there. They try to get away with having it survive on the street. And 2 out of the 3 things that happen to them are not good. They need laundry facilities. When it rains, they don't have much of a choice of what to do with their wet clothing. Oftentimes it just gets thrown out because they don't have the opportunity to dry it, they don't have the opportunity to wash it. Many of the people would gladly do laundry every week and have a limited number of possessions, but we don't provide any opportunities for them. And the big one, trash receptacles. So during one of my conversations, I'm sitting in a little circle with a bunch of homeless guys, and we're going down the list, you know, what do you need or what do you want? You know, I get the usual answers like I need a winning lottery ticket, you know, I need teeth. But then I kept hearing over and over again, we need someplace to throw the trash. And finally one guy sort of made it real simple for me to understand. He said, you know, if they're gonna blame us for all the trash, why don't they find a place for us to throw it away? Which led to me digging into the regulations and finding out how you close parking spaces, how you get a permit to drop a dumpster, just like a construction dumpster, and then you get volunteers, and you get a funding source, and we started putting a dumpster out on Monday and Thursday morning in a pilot project that ran from March through the end of June last year. We were there 34 days, from 8 until noon, twice a week. In those 34 days of limited time, we picked up 45 tons of trash. I didn't pick it up, the homeless picked it up. They proved that if given the opportunity to throw away the trash, they would. Now what did we see? We saw a lot of really surprising, unusual, intangible benefits. Number one, got them up and moving around, and they were proud to clean up. They also, unlike the city workers, they could grab things off the sidewalk and throw them away that the city people would have to wear hazmat suits if they were doing it because it's part of their union contract. So the needles get thrown away. The human feces get picked up and cleaned and thrown away. I had a thing when they would bring their bags to the dumpster, people occasionally would ask me, what is in it? And I'd say, as long as you're not putting any body parts in it, I don't want to know. We only took bags of trash. We didn't get many recyclables because I was paying $2 for them to fill up a bag of trash, but a bag of recycling 4 blocks away was worth $10. So they were filtering the recycling out by themselves because they could do the math. We gave out to some people $10. The first week we did it, we had a group of people across the street in 6 or 7 tents that literally the week before I had been over to call 911 for a drug overdose to get Narcan. I had been over there to try to keep people from beating each other to death with water bottles, broken up a fight with 2 of their dogs. In other words, these people were not happy with each other. The first day we had a couple of them come drift across the street and they maybe did collectively 5 bags of trash. So $10. The second day we were there, we noticed that they were all up and sweeping, and then 3 or 4 of them were bringing bags over, and they probably brought about 15 bags of trash. So $30. So that's Monday and Thursday. Well, Friday morning I'm down there to feed people at 8 o'clock, and they're over there going, come here, we gotta show you something. And I'm going, oh great, what is it this time? He goes, well, no, we want to show you something in the tent. And I'm going, okay, now it's dead body time. I'm prepared for what it is. They peeled back the tent, and what they had was chopped meat, chopped vegetables, tortillas, and a small grill. They pooled their money and they were having a taco party that afternoon. A week earlier they'd been trying to kill each other. They started supporting each other. They started building a little bit of a community. There was a lot of pride. We restored a little bit of dignity for a little bit of time. And the other thing is, by removing the physical trash, it became harder for the passersby on the trolley or walking or driving to not see them as people. It's real easy when they're mixed in with all the trash to lump them in and see them as human trash. But when you peel away the actual trash, what's left are people. And that changed the whole dynamic. I just got the data from the police department. You realize I'm talking about 8 months ago that I asked for it. That shows that in the time we were out there, the number of police calls in the area we were doing the pilot project in dropped significantly. In other words, we were giving them physical activity, a few dollars. Of course, everybody said, oh, you're gonna need to give them more than $2. I said, I can't give them much more than $2 because then I'll set them up getting robbed. Well, they're gonna take their money and spend it on drugs and alcohol. Now, we had people spend it on their cell phone bill, on paying their copay on their prescriptions that had been sitting at CVS for a month because they didn't have any money to pay the copay. Go do their laundry, call home. You know, occasionally we'd see somebody pull a couple dollars out and they'd buy cigarettes from somebody else. But that was really what we started seeing, is we saw them starting to build a functioning community. The younger people would help the older people bring their bags of trash to the dumpster. Sometimes they'd bring them for them and I'd give them the money and they'd watch, and they'd run back to the tent and give it to somebody who was unable to drag the bag themselves. I saw a lot of compassion. I saw a lot of caring. I started doing this. Some of the slides showed the early days when Judy and I would go to Costco, and we would buy a bunch of stuff in bulk, and then we'd come to our kitchen and we'd do an assembly line and make sandwiches and put oranges, and then, you know, Neosporin and Band-Aids and socks and sometimes underwear. Never apples or pears because the teeth are bad, so oranges, tangerines, bananas, grapes are good. You learn that the hard way when you give somebody who has no teeth an apple and they look at you like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? We're remarkably ignorant about the situation that they're in, and the more time you spend down on the street with the people, the more you understand them, and the more you understand that they're basically just trying to survive. They're not trying to cause trouble. The vast majority of them are you would be happy if they lived next door to you, if they had the funds to do so. So does the increased enforcement that everybody talks about? Well, we're going to write tickets and then they'll have to take services. Oops. Well, no, it doesn't work. When you write tickets for trespassing, for vagrancy, for encroachment, what you're doing is you're building a portfolio of problems that will keep them from being able to rent an apartment if and when they get either public assistance or they get a job and can afford to get off the street. Because now, if asked if they have had any encounters with law enforcement, they have to answer yes. Those are black marks that then make it impossible for them to get some of the housing that we all want them to get into. So the sweeps, I already talked about what it does. They kills their chances of owning. And the other thing is law enforcement is not trained to do this. We need social workers and psychologists. There's something called trauma-informed care. Police roll up and they're taught, and there's nothing wrong with this because, you know, their lives are at risk, I get it. But they're taught to roll up and enforce and take control of the situation, which is exactly the wrong thing to do with somebody who's scared and vulnerable because they react the wrong way. Because they're used to people being aggressive and that being bad. So the officers act like bad people, they get a bad response. You know, we talk a lot to the police about this. They know, but they don't have the staffing. So when people have been talking about defunding the police as it relates to homelessness, what they're talking about is reallocating some of the money from people wearing uniforms and guns into people wearing street clothes who are trained to deal with people who have mental health, drug abuse, and are otherwise suffering from PTSD. It's not a big shift in order for it to work. I mentioned I've seen some acts of compassion down there. When I started doing this, I guess I should probably go back to the beginning. Our house was being remodeled. We moved down to Little Italy, put our stuff in storage, rented a condo. And I was walking back from work, and well, actually I was walking back from a class I teach at USD in the nights at that time. And periodically I'd buy food for the class for our break. It was 7:10 to 10 p.m. on Monday. And I had leftover pizza. So I walked by three guys that were in a parking lot about a block from where we were renting at the time, and they said, "You gonna eat that?" And I was like, "Well, that's rude." And then I took a couple more steps, and I thought, no. Like everybody else, I'm gonna warm up one piece tomorrow for lunch, and on Friday I'm gonna throw the rest away when it's hard as a rock and stuck to the box. So I turned around and walked back and gave it to him. Then I started saying hello to him when I walked by, periodically. Then one night after class, I went and bought a new pizza and a liter of soda. And I sat down and said, "Here's pizza and here's soda, but I want you to talk to me. I want you to tell me how you ended up right here." And we had a conversation. And I found out things that I didn't know. And then I started looking at the homeless differently. And I started seeking out more encounters where you would ask people, "How'd you get here? What do you need to get out of here?" Not because I had solutions, but because I was interested in gathering information and finding out what the real story was. I worked with some groups on and off. Judy and I did it on and off. I stopped on my own downtown sometimes. I started carrying dog treats around because homeless people love their animals. They don't trust me, but if I can make a connection with their pet, and their pet likes me, and they're willing to talk about their pet, the next thing you know, they'll start telling me about themselves. That's something the police don't have time to do when they're interacting with homeless people. That's where the society has to change how we react to homeless people. I remember one day we had a cake at class, and it was this big Costco sheet cake, and so every time you get one of those, there's always a bunch left. So I went down to, I think it was Island and 16th, where I knew a friend of mine was running a program where they had San Diego State students come and feed the homeless, and I'd been down there a couple times, so I knew there were a lot of people there. And I brought plates and forks and set the cake down, and they lined up. Two of them started taking pieces and putting them on plates and passing them out. I was shocked. It wasn't what I expected. I expected once I set the cake down, it was gonna be like, locusts descending on it. Oh no, very orderly, very polite. Had people go, "Oh, you know what? We're running out of cake. Give it to the next person. I've already had some." One day I was down there, and I was down to the last bag of food we had, and this guy looked like if I blew on him, he'd fall over. And I said, "Hey, your luck, this is my last one." And he looked at me and he goes, "I ate yesterday. There's a pregnant woman down in the corner who hasn't had any food for 2 days. Please go give it to her." I cried on my way home that night. I don't see that in my own neighborhood very often. I saw somebody who was literally dying on the street make a decision there was somebody else who needed it more. Changed my view quite a bit. And I've seen that repeatedly since then. I've seen how the people on the street understand that there are different levels of vulnerability, and they protect the most vulnerable as much as they can. I've also learned some great things about the mental illness story. So as we started doing this project a couple years ago downtown, passing food out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, I was walking diagonally across the corner of 14th and Imperial, and there's a guy standing in the street, and I'm sure you've all seen the guy, he's out in front of the crowd, his pants are down to about here, you can see, he looks like a plumber, he's got the old button crack showing, he's waving his arms, he's jumping in front of cars, and you think, crazy as it could be. But I was walking by him and I said, "Hey, you want this water and snacks for later?" He goes, Yeah, set it down, I'll get to it in a minute. And they went right back to being nuts. I went, that doesn't make sense. So I waited, and I ran into him about a week and a half later, away from everybody, and I said, "Hey, I gave you food a week and a half ago when you were in the middle of the street. what's with it? He goes, oh, I act like I'm crazy. I said, what do you mean you act like you're crazy? He goes, oh no, I go out in the middle of the street. If I act crazy enough, the police will leave me alone because I'm paperwork to them. And the other homeless leave me alone because they think I'm crazy and dangerous. So I get personal space from this. And I thought, well, that makes sense because I do know one thing. I did sit in a psychology class one time, and I'm pretty sure if you're legitimately mentally ill, there's no switch where you can turn it on and off at will. But that little comment to him, yeah, sure, set it down. I'll get to it in a minute. You know, I mean, I was like approaching him like, you know, is it okay if I give this to you? And he's perfectly sane. He had developed a protection bubble and was able to actually keep himself safe by acting crazy. Which, if you think about it, is not crazy at all. It makes a lot of sense. Advance. What do we do?
Just the mouse.
No, yeah. Go to the tab that says slideshow to your right. There you go. Right there. And go ahead and view.
Current slide. There you go.
There you go. Perfect.
There we go.
Excellent.
So the story about the conversation and the dumpster project, this is pretty much what happened. The project stopped at the end of June while the Lucky Duck Foundation that funded the pilot project assessed all of the data that we had collected, and they made a decision at the end of September to bring it back on a semi-permanent basis. We got a lot of publicity, locally and nationally. I've since helped organize pilot projects in Oceanside and Ogden, Utah, where a bunch of hikers, environmentalists came in and wanted some help cleaning up one of the areas they hiked through. I've got Zoom calls next week with somebody from Renton, Washington, and today the other one came in from, do you remember where the other one was? Let's see if I can think about where that, oh, from Manchester, New Hampshire. I've talked to people in Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Oakland, Jacksonville, Florida, Baltimore, Maryland, and I did a Zoom presentation to a bunch of Rotary people in Columbus, Ohio, where their Rotary district is interested in doing something as a district-wide project. I retired at the end of the year, and basically what I want to try to do is I want to increase creating a number of these small, very local, ground-up projects that I think are really what could get traction and getting the people ready. If they're up and they're moving and they're feeling good, they're much more willing to entertain a discussion about services if and when they're available. The problem right now is it's such a terrible thing. They go and they fill the paperwork out. They do everything right, and then they're told, you're on a 3-year waiting list for housing in San Diego. And that's a short waiting list right now. It has been as long as 10 years. That's a big problem to somebody who's trying to survive until tomorrow. Tell them, if you could just hold on for 10 years, then we'll have a room for you. I believe what we need to do is we need to take the services that we have in waiting for housing first, and we need to bring the services to where the people are now. Now, admittedly, without housing, some of those services won't have much of an impact, but it's better than where they are. We can bring services to the sidewalk. We can bring mental health people out to talk. We can get people into groups where they work on beating drug addiction together by supporting each other. We can get people part-time employment where they work out a deal where I'll watch your tent while you wash dishes in the morning, and then I'll go in the afternoon. We can find employers who are willing to let somebody put their tent behind their business in order to pick up a worker that'll do jobs that nobody else will do. But those are solutions that require us to work from the ground up. Politicians are not going to come up with that. That's not the photo op, that's not the re-election message they want to send. I did not have a single elected official in 4 months come down and visit the dumpster. Even when I invited them, and said, look, you can take credit. You can do your photo op. You can have your soundbite. I don't care. Richard Horton was the gentleman who helped conceive this, who sleeps today still on Commercial Street between 14th and 16th next to the trolley. He got tired of talking to the media. They would come to his tent and go, get away from me. I don't want it. People know who I am now. I don't want to be known. Richard is 64 years old, and he's from Cleveland, Ohio, and he's talked to me a lot about his life. I've had a number of really strange encounters. When we started the dumpster project, we used to go down on Sunday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon to remind people, tomorrow morning the dumpster's going to be there. Spread the word. Well, there was a guy named, his name's Art. Art had been there a few times, and so I happened to be down and I saw Art, and I said, hey Art, just wanted to remind you, dumpster tomorrow, and let everybody know. He said, well, I'm glad you did that, because I'm from Ohio and I'm a little slow. I thought he knew that I was from Ohio, so I thought that was funny. I said, really funny, Art, I'm from Ohio. And he goes, oh, where? I said, a suburb of Columbus. He said, how about you? He goes, little town in northeastern Ohio you never heard of. I said, well, try me. I used to do a lot of stuff up in the Cleveland area when I was doing real estate work back in Ohio. It's called Geneva. I said, Art, how old are you? Art's 3 years younger than I am. I'm about to turn 68, so Art's 65. Geneva's a really small town. I said, Art, did you happen to know the Carter family? Art said, well, yeah. So I played high school football with Randy Carter, and I dated his sister, Cindy. Randy was my college roommate at Yale. Randy and Cindy, unfortunately, both passed away several years ago from cancer. But Randy's older sister, Carol, still lives in Geneva and is a retired teacher. So I called her. She said, oh yeah, I know Art. I had his kids in my kindergarten class. I know his ex-wife. He has a son who is severely disabled, and that broke up the marriage and it crushed Art, and that he disappeared. I said, well, Carol, I found him. Art is back in Geneva, working, doing demolition, taking rooftops off before they put new shingles on, and is getting his cancer treatment at the VA hospital out of Cleveland. Small world. I mean, he's been in the same house that I was in on Old Orchard Drive in Geneva, Ohio. 50 years apart, but nonetheless, stories like that convince me that every person out there has a story and a connection if we just are willing to take the time to treat them as individuals and not lump them together as one societal problem. The project is going to keep going. These are some of the things I've learned. Probably the most interesting one is number 4. How many people know somebody who's in the mortuary business? But they have kind of a bizarre sense of humor sometimes about their job, and it's really, I think, necessary. I worked with a guy who did that, that's why I say that. And he would tell jokes that I thought were just really weird. But then I started thinking, what does he do all day long? Maybe it's not so weird if that's how you blow off steam. Same thing with the homeless. They have incredible senses of humor. I can't even tell you how many times I've been doubled over in laughter at some seemingly innocuous comment by somebody made after somebody walks by and says something like, get a job, and then, get a face job, you need a facelift. I mean, they come back just like that. It's just, it has enriched my life by giving me an opportunity to meet a segment of society that most people don't know. And I, Morelli made some kind words, but what I feel is not anything other than I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that the rest of the world still doesn't understand. These people are not out here because they want to be out here, and I hear that all the time. They want to be here. Now, if I asked 100 people how many of them wanted to be out there in our area tomorrow morning, I guess maybe 2 might say yes. But no, they don't want to be out there. They'd rather be almost anywhere else. Nothing drives me more crazy than reading about a new program that's going to end homelessness. We will never end homelessness. If nothing else, the 100-year statistics tell us we'll never end it. So what do we need to do now that everybody's in dense urban areas? We need to find a way to peacefully coexist. We need to find a way to give them the best chance at success, understanding that their starting point is a sidewalk where they sleep at night. Some of them on a piece of cardboard wrapped in a blanket with no tent. It's going to be 40-some degrees down there tonight. There will be people that we call the hard sleepers who are on a piece of cardboard wrapped up in a thin blanket, and I'll see them tomorrow when I walk around. And I check on them because I worry that some of them won't survive. I've made friends with some of the people down there. They never have reached out and tried to take advantage of me. I almost never get asked for money. It's weird because homeless populations in different cities are very different. I was on the East Coast and I did a roundtable in New Haven, Connecticut to discuss the homelessness. And I noticed as I was walking around, every single homeless person I walked by asked me for money. Got any change? Got any change? Got any change? It was nonstop. San Diego, almost never see anybody panhandling. Maybe the 1 or 2 guys at the freeway ramps, or a guy in front of Costco's parking lot on Market, but that's it. Downtown, I walk around 400 or 500 homeless people 3 or 4 times a week. I never ask for money. There's nobody sitting on the corner with a bucket going, spare change. No, you don't see it, and I don't understand why, but it's very noticeable. So one of the things as I go forward with the dumpster idea is, I've been asked by one of the other city council people now to go up to City Heights and try to see if I can find a place to put one. There's a couple things they need to understand is this won't work everywhere. You need to have a relationship with the people. You need to have some element of trust and communication established. If you simply pull up with a dumpster and drop it on the corner and announce, we're here, and here's the trash bags, they won't come near you because that's really suspicious. So I'm going to go out to City Heights and I'm going to go visit some of the encampments. I'm going to talk to some of the people. I've never been there before, but I'm going to see if I can find an encampment that may already have heard stories about this and get somebody who's willing to sort of take ownership of it and spread the word. You also have to look at the logistics. Where does it go? How many parking spaces need to be closed? Like I said, every solution will be somewhat different, but there are multiple things that we can do on projects like this. Almost to clean up in the parks. You can put them to work as part-time workers. Every time I hear somebody, I tried to contact the San Diego chapter of the California Restaurant Association when restaurants were reopening and saying they couldn't find dishwashers, even though they're willing to pay $19 or $20 an hour for a dishwasher. I said, how about if you grab some of these people and teach them how to wash dishes the right way? They'll be, for $19 or $20 an hour, they'll go kill people for you. Look at what they did for $2 a bag. But they didn't even call me back. I get so frustrated when somebody says, I need unskilled labor, and I say, here you go. And they go, no, not those people. No, those are exactly the people you want. They're the ones who, if you show them some kindness, they will be loyal to you like you would not believe. Because nobody in their world has been showing them any kindness. These are some of the things you can do. Small nonprofits are really effective because they have boots on the ground. There's one downtown called Think Dignity that provides showers and storage. They help try to get people housing, but right now we literally have no housing. I had somebody the other day say, well, we can put them on the shelter beds. I go to the Homeless Response Center on the corner of 14th and Imperial and stick my head in almost every morning and say, how many shelter beds are available? In Old County, we have 5. 4 of them are top bunks, which means older people can't use them. So functionally, at any one time, they may have 1 bottom bunk shelter bed available in the county. And yet we talk about being housing first, and we can't even get them into the large shelters. Volunteer, do some clothing, food drives. Read the press releases with a grain of salt. Don't believe what you're reading. And then, as I've told people all along, when you walk by somebody homeless, don't avert your eyes or cross the street. Look them in the eye and say hello. That might be the best thing that happens to them, is to be seen as a human being today. And it means a lot. I counsel volunteers that, yeah, you may get some strange responses. I mean, I do every once in a while. I mean, there's always something catching me off guard, but the bottom line is, every day I come home, combination of feeling much better about what I did and much sadder about what they're going through. Because I can't fix it, but I can at least make today a little bit better for them. And that sometimes is all we can do for anybody. And that's it.